Welcome to Grain Rainbows, the podcast community for people coming out LGBT plus later in life. I'm your host, Dr. Ginger Campbell. For more episodes of Grain Rainbows, please visit my website at grainrainbows.com or subscribe in your favorite podcasting app. You can send me email at grainrainbows@gmail.com or submit voice feedback at speakpipe.com/Doc Artemis. Grain Rainbows also has a Facebook community, and I'll tell you more about that later. Today's guest is Mark David Gibson, author of Served in Silence, The Struggle to Live Authentically. Mark shares the story of his struggle serving in the Air Force during the time of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, as well as his recovery from alcoholism. And of course, he's going to tell us what he does now. Please stay tuned after the interview because I will tell you how you can get Mark's book and more. So welcome to Grain Rainbows, Mark. It is great to finally get you on the show.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Ginger. I'm very happy to be here.
So usually I ask my guests to start out by just telling the audience a little bit about themselves, to share their story in whatever way they want to.
Once again, I'm just honored to be here, and it was awesome meeting you at Creating Change. It's just one of those connections that you make along life's path that we didn't just meet, we collided in a great way. So I'm happy to finally be here and that the universe has aligned and we've gotten our schedules together and able to chat a little bit. Real briefly about me, my name is Mark David Gibson. I'm the author of Served in Silence, The Struggle to Live Authentically. It's my memoir that discusses the don't ask, don't tell policy before, during, and after. It's doing really well, and you can bounce over to Amazon at markonamazon.com to check it out over there. The other thing that I wanted to tell your listeners is that I'm also a retired U.S. Air Force officer, where I did 20 years in the United States Air Force, 10 years enlisted, and 10 years as an officer. And then after I retired, I did a short little respite 6-month backpacking trip to Europe to take a little break. And then I joined corporate America, where I absolutely loved my job. I just hated the commute and slogging through the snow of the Northeast in Washington, D.C. That wore on me pretty quickly. And my boss at the time urged me just to go on a vacation. And he and his wife had just went on a vacation to Costa Rica at the time. And I said, sure, I'll go to Costa Rica. Well, that was a big mistake because I went to Costa Rica and fell in love with Costa Rica that I didn't return. I sold my house and I retired again from a second career, short-lived career. Then I fully retired and lived in Costa Rica for 3 glorious years till family reasons brought me back to the U.S., where I landed a job with the U.S. Small Business Administration as the public affairs officer for the state of Georgia. That's where I'm currently based, in Georgia, in Atlanta. Quickly after getting that job, I was then promoted to the National Communications Director for LGBT outreach under the Obama administration. Currently here, working in Atlanta for the U.S. Small Business Administration out of Washington, D.C. And Mr. Wonderful and I just enjoy our home here in Midtown Atlanta. So glad to be here.
So the first question that I just have to ask you is, how is your job affected by the fact that Obama's not president anymore?
The gloom and doom of politics affect us all, right? But I don't think, as far as my job is concerned, we're squarely focused on entrepreneurs and making sure that we give entrepreneurs equal and fair access to all of the programs and services that are afforded to the taxpayer. It's actually kind of like a Switzerland job because no party politics involved.
Would you be willing to share a little bit about your coming out story?
Wow, yeah,
because that's what this podcast is about, Mark. You can't avoid it.
and no spoiler alerts from the book, but I'll go into it in more detail in the book. But Yeah, I think that I am a typical story for some that we've already heard about young people that are just clawing at the edges and the fringe to get out, to get out of the either small town where you grew up in or see the military as an avenue to get out and see the world and find yourself kind of thing. And that was definitely me. I hit all of those, checked all those boxes when I was 16 and contemplating joining the military, which I had to wait until 17 with parental permission. And so off I go at age 17 and join the military. And Ginger, it was at that time I was sitting there in the recruiter's office in upstate New York in Saratoga Springs. And Sergeant Doyle, with his then you could smoke in your offices, he had a pipe and filling out the application, everything was fine. He would go over each one of the boxes until it came to the very last box. He paused and he said, I really want you to pay attention to the last box, which I thought was kind of odd. And here you are talking about giving up your civilian privileges, you're giving up your rights and all of these different things. You can't be a conscientious objector. And then it switches like a glass of cold water in your face to sexuality, which I was just like, well, that's very bizarre. At 17, it wasn't something that was talked about around the dining room table. So I certainly wasn't going to talk about it with my recruiting officer in Saratoga Springs. So I joined the military, and I think, like a lot of other people, I just pushed those thoughts or feelings aside and stuffed them down as, well, I'm in the military, so I can't be gay. When I would do these things to reinforce it in my own life, that, well, I must not be gay because I'm in the military and I'm traveling and I'm doing all these things. And then, if I get married, then I definitely can't be gay after all. So I got married, and about 9 years into my career, it was when I had a awakening, if you will. And it was my mother who actually came out to me one night on the telephone. She said, is the reason why you're so unhappy all the time is because you're dealing with your sexuality? Is it because you're gay? And, at that point in a trusted conversation, I was like, yeah, it is. And that's why I'm having these hard times in life, because I was a pretty happy go lucky. I was very upbeat, very motivated. I loved being in the military. But it just seemed like I had this cloud of gloom and doom around me where internally I just wasn't happy. Looking back many years later, after writing a book, writing a memoir is like ripping off Band-Aids to old wounds or healing some that haven't completely healed. Of course, it makes sense that when we struggle to live authentically, then we're out of alignment. If you try to drive your car down the highway that is out of alignment, we all know what that feels like and how it wears on the tires differently. It doesn't get great gas mileage. Well, I think that's the same for us and our operating systems in our minds is when we aren't in alignment authentically, whether it is with your sexuality, with your relationships at work, or just in life and your personal relationships, then it is the same thing. It's disjointed, and it causes for that obstructed way to live. And so that's briefly, I have a couple of stages of coming out, because that was coming out, but then it was slamming the door so shut that now I'm under the don't ask, don't tell policy. And which was and we could talk about that later, but that was just such a dehumanizing and demoralizing policy that it gave this false hope of security. But what it was lighting the ticking time bomb in a lot of people, that it was a cancer that just slowly decayed at the foundation of people's integrity and people's morals.
So even though that wasn't Clinton's intention, it was one of those unintended consequences scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you look back on the process, because I know that you went into a lot of detail in your book, and that's where you put all that energy, how many years would you say it really took you to get to a place where you felt you were living authentically?
Wow. It was a long time in coming. Back to that analogy and the alignment, let's say the car, and the car is going down the highway, powerful machine, and the car will try to do things to autocorrect. The car will try everything that it can to pull it to the center and get back in alignment. I think that's the same with me and my operating system, that when I wasn't in alignment, that my body or my system tried to autocorrect. And sadly, I sought autocorrection with alcohol and alcoholism. And I battled alcoholism for the greater part of my life, from about age 14 until my 40s. There were many layers to the coming out and the coming out phase, and doing some really tough work on the inside and really rolling up the sleeves and trying to figure this out of, well, if you're going to live an authentic life, which that was not a clearly defined roadmap at the time, as I was just muddling through all of the swamp internally of my mind. But I knew clearly I had to do battle with alcoholism and PTSD. Once I conquered both of those huge battles in my life, I was able to then clearly see through the battlefield, if you will, of the struggle to live authentically. Is I no longer needed that type of Novocaine. I was okay with who I was as a person to be able to identify what an authentic life looks like and in alignment. I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that it's puppy dog kisses and butterflies every day, and it's a tough world out there. But I will say that I kind of feel like Kathy Griffin too. I'm getting to the answer to your question. When was it that I finally felt? So I will say that once things are in alignment, and like that car going down the highway, it doesn't pull to either side, and it runs at top notch. And I was able to start experiencing unimaginable joy in my life. Just joy in daily living and just waking up and not having to put up the umbrella in the house because I feel like it's going to rain on me and rain on my parade. But it wasn't until much later in life, until I actually did the hard work of defining what is it that I want for my life. And I would say it would take probably until later on, until my early 40s, did I finally realize everything all at once, but then had to take some more time out to figure out, how do I do battle with alcoholism? How do I put my mind back into check with PTSD and the crushing memories from several deployments? And those all exacerbated by not living authentically, fueled by alcohol, is once again a ticking time bomb.
So your story, I think, is important in telling us that being gay was not the only piece, right? There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked you the question about how long is because from the feedback I get from my listeners, I know that many of them are still struggling with actually coming out. And I'm not trying to say that it's a one time you did it, it's all over. I don't know anyone who experiences it that way. But wanting them to be compassionate toward themselves, it takes however long it takes, right?
Right. Yeah. I just received an award from Business Equality Magazine as a legacy leader in the LGBT community. And the advice, they wanted to know if I could give some advice for other people. And I think that it would be very pertinent for your audience members as well. Is one of the advices, don't be so hard on yourself. In the 24-hour news cycle and the constant contact with emails and text messaging and all of these different things, and, oh, I didn't respond fast enough, or I didn't do all of the things. okay, I think that when you're dealing with getting your own operating system in check, that we just take a moment and just don't be so hard on ourselves. Take a moment to really champion the small things in our lives. And I know we've seen it before. We've seen those bumper stickers and all of those different things. But I really think that it is valuable, especially when you feel like you are standing in the middle of the storm. It's just really hard to focus on any one thing. And then the other thing I would say, especially with the turmoil of everything that goes on, is take time to, when was the last time that we just took time to laugh out loud, or just get crazy and dance with yourself, or do something to celebrate yourself? Because at our age or our stages in our careers, we do have a lot to celebrate, that we've made it to whatever level that we've made it to. So I think that for your listeners that are out there, and for people I talk to on my book tour, I talk to people young and old. The young people don't understand what the don't ask, don't tell policy was, and I'm glad for that. There are older people that approach me that not only understand what it was, but understood how it ruined their lives and their families and their relationships and all of those different things. I think that it's just a matter of paying particular attention to the small wins of authenticity in our lives.
Have you ever considered hiring a personal coach? The key tool of coaching is asking empowering questions that help clients live more fulfilling lives. I'm currently training to become a certified professional coach, and I will begin to accept a limited number of clients in November 2019. In the meantime, I'm offering free introductory discovery sessions to the first 10 people who email me. If this sounds like something you want to try, just write to me at grainrainbows@gmail.com. If you're listening after November 2019, you'll want to go to the website to learn more about my coaching. I guess this book tour has given you a lot of opportunity to talk to a lot of different people, and I want to talk about that. But what about the process of writing the book? Would you recommend memoir writing to people as something that's helpful?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's not for the weak. It is, I think that because there's all of these different, and I think I saw a commercial yesterday from somebody that's going to publish your book in 30 days and off to the races, and here you go. For people to write a memoir and to sit down and really come out with your visions statement, your objective, your mission. What do you want to do? Those should be like the fishbone to the outline to even starting putting pen to paper. I think that some people go into writing their memoirs because they just feel that gravitational pull to, I just got to do it and I've got to get it done. And then the mission statement and the objectives come along with it, while they're writing. But I think it is very helpful. I think it is very therapeutic and helping. And some people, you might want to even do it. You may never even publish it, but you might write it to yourself. And it might be very therapeutic, and it might be helpful to settle the raging seas or storms in your life by way of writing. But I do recommend it. It's a lot of work, so I would brace for impact for anybody that hasn't written. The key ingredient that I found is I'm a really good chef, but you need those key ingredients, and you need the good ingredients to make that beautiful meal at the end. And I was very fortunate to team with an awesome publishing team, the only LGBT certified publishing firm in the country. That was just a perfect mix. As a matter of fact, just before our interview today, Ginger, I just made reservations. Our editor is going to be in town, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing her tonight, and just these long-lasting relationships with the entire publishing team. So to answer your question, I would say yes, I think it is a good outlet.
Actually, the reason I met you at Creating Change was because you were at the Publish Your Purpose booth, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I am actually going to get Jen on the show at some time in the future. Actually, I also plan to work with her after I finish my coach training. I can only do one extra project at a time.
Yes, I totally understand. I hear you.
So what's the difference between writing down your story and, say, sharing it with me on a podcast? And I ask this because I'm trying to encourage listeners who are ready to share their story with other listeners. But how would you compare those two experiences?
I think they're very similar to me, because writing your memoir, you're telling a story, and you're actually just you don't have the joy of maybe talking to an old friend like Ginger on the phone or on an interview, and that makes it a little bit softer. But if you are writing as if you are writing to a friend, and you're writing from a position in your heart and in your mind out of love, then I think that it's an easier process. I don't really see a lot of difference, other than this is where the rest of the team comes in to help you with the run-on sentences. Or, Mr. Wonderful read the manuscript, and he came to me the first time and he wanted to know what my aversion to commas was in life. Or the editor will be able to take a 20-page chapter and whittle it down and get it done in 4 pages. And just really get it more buttoned up and tightened up. That's really the only difference, is that editorial process.
What's the most surprising thing that you've learned along the way?
In general, or with the book process?
In general.
Oh, boy.
Or you could narrow it down to the coming out process if you want, just thinking about my listeners.
My best friend and I, we kid each other a lot, but we're very, very serious. We both were in the Air Force. We weren't deployed to the same wars. He was in Iraq and I was in Afghanistan, but still suffered the effects of war. I think that the biggest thing would be if you put your arm out and you walk, you go in a circle and you put your arm straight out, that's pretty much the distance of what you could probably control. Inward, not outward, inward. I think if we just pay attention and focus on that and realize that outside that, we call it the 3 feet rule, you're outside of my 3 feet rule. I can't control. I might be able to assist, but if you're in a bad mood, or if there's something going on that is outside of my control, I think that's where we tip the cart over, where we try to fix, we try to manipulate, we try to anticipate, and all of that energy that goes on. And it tends to probably just leads to frustration. Whereas if you just paid attention to your arm straight out and turn in a circle, that's pretty much your control in life. That focus the positive energy on what you can do within that inner circle.
That's a really good version of change is an inside job.
Yeah, sure is.
I noticed that your book is now available on Audible. And I was curious, I know you've got a surprise, but before you get to that, yeah. I'm curious about the narrator. How did you get the narrator? Because I saw that he had done a wide variety of other things for Audible.
This is part of the entire process that was just so awesome in learning about the book, and people that have a lot of energy like myself, and I'm an overachiever, I'm going to go. I think I'm uncomfortable with other people on my team at times, because I don't mind building the plane as we fly it. That makes some people a little uncomfortable. And That was kind of the process with the book. But then I also had an awesome publisher that I relied on and I felt very safe with. So I knew that although I was building it in the air, that she actually was flying the plane and we weren't going to crash. So we launched the book in March of 2018 at the Fox Theater here in Atlanta. At the 1 year anniversary, somewhere along the way, probably on a run or I don't know where I was, I decided I wanted to publish the audiobook on the 1 year anniversary. Again, I have no idea what that's, how to even do that or what's entailed. So I fire off an email to my team at Publish Your Purpose Press. And they said, absolutely. We think that's a great idea. And here is the roadmap for success. And it's almost like the manuscript process because you have to have a publisher, an audiobook publisher, and there's an editorial staff and quality review and all these different things. So I hired a audiobook publisher, and she is the one that pretty much handled all of the behind the scenes. I already mentioned that I work a full-time job. We have a pretty exciting personal life, and my Mark David Gibson speaker author time is pretty valuable and minimal. So I've learned along the way to hire great teams that help you get to the finish line. And Tina did a great job in putting together a narrative out there. And the way that her company works is people audition when they see the project. And so she told me that we could expect a couple dozen of responses for the project for narrators that would be interested in doing the book. Well, after the first week, we had over 50 interested parties that wanted to take on the project. And I just told her, I said, I don't have the time to interview 50 people. And so I need you and your leadership to give me back, the top 10 out of those. And I received all top 10. They're little audio files and you get to listen to them. I got the room all prepared. I had my water. It was dark. It was quiet. The fan's on. And I scored each one. Mr. Wonderful came home from work and I did the same thing for him. I sat him down in the office and dimmed the lights and had him close his eyes. I could be a little cheesy. And I had him score them as well. And we both scored Arthur the highest. And then we just were off to the races. Arthur is an amazing voice actor. As you had mentioned, he's done a lot of work on Broadway. He was King Arthur in Camelot, and we could not be any more pleased with him bringing the manuscript to life in the audiobook.
I may have to actually listen to it. I mean, I've already read it, but
it's fun. It's really fun. And the feedback that I get from my book is a little different because I didn't want to be beholden to chapter 1, chapter 2, I don't know why, but I was just adverse to chapters. So the publishing team and I got together and I wanted to break it out into 4 sections. So my book is broken out into the early years, the learning years, the wonder years, and then the living years. And throughout each one of those sections, they're very small. Sometimes they're just vignettes. And it tells these stories of, if you were putting together a puzzle, of the struggle to live authentically and then getting on to the living years. So with the format of the book, the response and the reviews have been that they really like the fact it's a very quick read and it's not, it's not like a commitment of it's not War and Peace. It's not, 500 pages for all these different chapters. And Arthur does a fantastic job he got it. He really understood what it was like to be that young boy that was very energetic and full of lots of wonder and mischief, and then to the not so great times of staring at the bottom of empty vodka bottles and in the dark and living in sheer hell, living a life in the military. So it turned out to be an excellent, excellent project. I listened to it twice now in full. We drive a lot in between our homes, and so we get to listen to a bunch of different audiobooks.
So, Mark, what else would you like to share before we close?
Can I share the little secret to your listeners, or surprise? So what we have is, since we just got done, be a nice segue to the audiobook. And for your listeners, if they would like a free download for the audiobook, they can go to my website, which is markdavidgibson.com/audiobook. And there's a link that will take you to the free download. Please enjoy it. If I could ask one favor, I would love, love, love your feedback and your reviews on Audible. Since it is a new release, we're a little shy on some of our reviews. The other thing that I'm working on, which is very near and dear to us at Team Served in Silence, the proceeds for my book go to draw focus and attention on LGBT homelessness and youth homelessness in particular. And I'm on the board of directors at the Rainbow House here in Atlanta, where we seek to provide solutions, safe, affordable solutions for homeless LGBT kids on the street. Sadly, tonight, Ginger, in Atlanta, there'll be over 900 kids on the streets and kicked out of their homes or homeless for various reasons. And so what we aim to do at Rainbow House is to acquire some property, and we are going to build a tiny home village for transitional from homelessness to safe housing to a job to a home, etc. So also on my website, I'm doing a fundraiser for Pride Month, which is markdavidgibson.com/hardcover. And I have a limited edition hardcover book where you can place an order and you receive a free gift with purchase. And I have a few of those still left, which is a bookmark. And the proceeds from the hardcover book go to the Rainbow House Coalition.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else that you want to share?
You know, I would love to share with your listeners and your audience that, again, let's not be so hard on ourselves, and life is difficult as it is. In my book, Served in Silence, The Struggle to Live Authentically, I use that as a roadmap for people to identify the hazards of not living authentically. It's not a how-to book. It's just basically a roadmap that shows us, and maybe you can identify the hazards in your own life, the challenges that you're having, that when you're not living authentically, and what happens. A couple of resources that I would recommend for your listeners, in addition to just start creating some strong networks of like-minded individuals. Community centers across the country under centerlink.org is a great network of LGBTQ plus people, like-minded people in your local communities, with various different offerings, from poetry to business development to gardening, all kinds of wonderful things. Centerlink is a great organization. You can check them out at centerlink.org. If you're more business inclined, if you're thinking of maybe a second career, a third career as an entrepreneur or as a consultant or an advisor, you can check with your local NGLCC Chamber of Commerce in your area, your LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and get involved there to help shine a little light in sometimes a stormy world. And once again, I'm Mark David Gibson. You can reach me at markdavidgibson.com, or you can catch my books, the soft cover, the ebook, the hardcover, and now the audiobook on markonamazon.com.
I'm so glad I was able to get Mark Gibson on Grain Rainbows. I will have the link to his website and his book at grainrainbows.com. If you're interested in writing, you can check out the Author's Journey podcast, and I'll also have a link to Publish Your Purpose Press. Please let me know what you think about this show. You can send me email at grainrainbows@gmail.com or submit voicemail at speakpipe.com/Doc Artemis. You can also leave comments at the Grain Rainbows website or on the Grain Rainbows Facebook fan page. If you'd like to join our private Facebook group, the easiest thing to do is to go to the fan page and then click the link that you'll see to the right of the Grain Rainbows logo. Recently, quite a few people have submitted requests to join the group without answering the questions. The questions are there to protect the privacy of everyone in the group. If you don't want to take the time to answer, please at least indicate that you listen to the podcast and tell me your favorite episode. Midge Noble is helping me keep up with these requests, but we can't approve people who don't provide at least a brief description of why they want to join. Before I close, I want to thank you for listening and for sharing Grain Rainbows with others. I'm still sending out Amazon gift cards to everyone who sends a screenshot of their iTunes review, but word of mouth is probably more effective. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at social media, so I really need your help to get the word out. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Grain Rainbows, but in the meantime, I hope you'll check out my other podcasts, Books and Ideas, and Brain Science. Thanks again for listening. Grain Rainbows is copyright Virginia Campbell, MD. You can copy this show to share it with others, but for any other uses or derivatives, please contact me at grainrainbows@gmail.com.